Darkness was a predator that ruled the ancient world. But one discovery changed everything, a single flicker of flame that ignited the human mind itself. This is the story of the brain revolution, a journey into how the invention of fire reshaped human thought. By the end, you will understand how a simple campfire set the stage for language, art, and the very structure of our societies. We will uncover how a cooked meal might have fueled our big brains and why the first stories were told in the dancing firelight. How did a simple spark create the modern human mind? The night was a prison of fear and cold. Imagine huddling in the darkness, every rustle in the undergrowth a potential threat, the chill seeping deep into your bones. Survival was a brutal, full-time job. Daylight hours were consumed by a desperate search for food, which was often tough, fibrous plants and raw meat that demanded hours of strenuous chewing. All that physical effort, from digestion to simply staying warm, left little surplus energy for the brain. This was the harsh reality for our ancient ancestors, a world where existence was reactive, governed by the immediate needs of the body. Social bonds were likely fleeting, formed for protection and dissolved when resources grew scarce. Communication was practical, a series of grunts and gestures pointing out danger or food. There was no time for storytelling, for planning the next day's hunt, or for gazing at the stars and wondering what they were. The mind was trapped in the present moment, a captive of the endless cycle of day and night. Then everything changed with a single, terrifying spark. That primal fear of fire was entirely rational, for it was a force of pure destruction. Yet somewhere in our deep past, a profound shift occurred. Instead of just running from a wildfire, an ancestor, or perhaps a small group of them, did the unthinkable. They approached the dying embers of a lightning-struck tree. They saw the potential within the chaos, the exact moment when a human first carried a burning branch back to a campsite is lost to time, a quiet revolution without a witness. Was it a single act of incredible courage, or was it a slow dawning of understanding over countless generations, watching how fire cleared land and left behind easier-to-eat food? Either way, the act of tending a flame, of keeping it alive and moving it at will, was humanity's first true technological leap. This was not just using a found rock as a tool. This was harnessing a fundamental power of nature itself. For the first time, we were not just subjects of our environment, we were its manipulators. The psychological impact of that control is almost impossible to overstate. To stand before a fire you built and feel its heat on your skin was to feel a new kind of power. It fostered a sense of agency that must have been utterly intoxicating. This was the seed of all human ambition, the first time we looked at the world and said, in some primal way, I can change this. This newfound command over light and heat was the essential first step. But its most immediate and tangible benefit was about to reshape our very bodies from the inside out. That single flame did more than just push back the darkness. It shattered the sun's absolute rule, carving out a brand new piece of the day we now call evening. For the first time, night was not a prison sentence of fear and inactivity, but a protected space for something new. The campfire became a bubble of light and safety, a magnetic focal point that drew people together after the sun went down. And within that bubble, something revolutionary happened. Those extra hours of light were not spent on the exhausting work of survival. They were the first true leisure time humanity had ever known. This was not time for chewing tough roots or scanning the horizon for predators. This was time for the mind. Gathered in the fire's warm glow, our ancestors began to talk. They shared stories of the day's hunt, recounting close calls and moments of triumph. They began to craft tools with more care and complexity, their hands working by the steady light. They could plan for tomorrow, strategizing where to find water or which paths to avoid. This nightly ritual around the communal hearth became humanity's first classroom. It was here that knowledge was passed down from elder to child, not in a frantic rush but in the quiet of the evening. Skills were demonstrated, social bonds were strengthened through shared laughter and song, and a collective culture was born, forged in the dancing flames. This new social world, however, created a powerful new problem. How do you share a complex idea, or warn of a danger you saw yesterday, or tell a story about a spirit you believe lives in the river without a way to truly talk about it? The pressure to communicate these intricate thoughts, born in the firelight, would soon ignite an explosion of its own. This shared hearth became the world's first social network, a glowing nexus where humanity truly learned to be a community. The fire's circle of light defined a new social space, forcing individuals into prolonged face-to-face contact. In the flickering orange glow, they had to read subtle facial expressions, interpret tones of voice, and understand the unspoken language of body posture. This constant, close-quarters interaction demanded a more sophisticated form of communication than simple alarm calls or gestures for food. It fostered the development of empathy, as people could see and share in each other's reactions, their joys and their fears. This environment was a crucible for trust, sharing food cooked over the communal flame, taking turns tending the fire through the night. These were acts of mutual dependence that strengthened the bonds of the group immeasurably. Cooperation was no longer just a fleeting strategy for a single hunt. It became the bedrock of daily life. This newfound social cohesion allowed for larger, more stable bands to form, groups that could defend territory, share childcare, and care for the sick and elderly. The hearth was more than just a source of warmth, it was the center of everything. It was the stage for the first rituals, perhaps a simple chant to celebrate a successful hunt. It was the birthplace of storytelling, where elders recounted the deeds of ancestors, passing down knowledge, values, and a shared history. This was the moment culture itself was born, a collective identity forged in the firelight. It was around these flames that the earliest concepts of family, leadership, and a shared group identity were slowly negotiated and solidified. But this intense social crucible, this new world of complex relationships and shared ideas, created a powerful new pressure. How could they possibly discuss the intricate details of a past event, plan for a future seasonal migration, or explain the complex nature of a newly conceived spirit without a far more powerful tool for thought? This social world, built around the fire, demanded a revolution in communication. That revolution began not with a new sound, but with a radical change to the very fuel that powered our bodies. That revolution began with a change to our most basic fuel, food. Before fire, eating was a chore, a long and exhausting process of chewing tough raw meat and fibrous plants for hours every single day. Our bodies had to pour a tremendous amount of energy into simply breaking down our meals, powering massive jaw muscles and a large, complex digestive system. But the discovery of cooking changed the very equation of survival. By applying flame to food, our ancestors were, in effect, pre-digesting it. The heat broke down tough fibers and complex proteins, making a wealth of calories and nutrients instantly available. This was a metabolic bonanza, a sudden windfall of energy that the human body had never known before. Think of the difference between trying to extract nourishment from a raw, sweet potato versus a baked one. The cooked version is soft, sweet, and easily digested, yielding its energy with minimal effort. This is precisely what fire did for our entire diet. This new, efficient energy source had a profound biological consequence. The body, no longer needing to maintain such a powerful and energy-intensive digestive system, could redirect those precious resources elsewhere. And the biggest beneficiary was the most energy-hungry organ of all, the brain. A surge of accessible calories from cooked food provided the fuel necessary to support a larger, more complex neural network. We can still see the physical evidence of this shift in our own bodies. Compare our relatively small teeth and jaws and our shorter intestinal tracts to those of our primate cousins. These are the anatomical footprints of a cooking revolution, the signs that fire outsourced the hard work of digestion, freeing our biology to invest in intelligence. This was the metabolic key that unlocked our cognitive potential, turning a surplus of calories into the very thoughts you are having right now. The evidence is etched into our own bones. Look at the fossil record, and you can trace the moment our bodies began to transform. Around the same period, we find widespread evidence for controlled fire. The skulls of our ancestors start to show a dramatic change. Their cranial capacity expands, a clear sign that the brain itself was growing larger. This was not a slow, gradual shift, but a surge in cognitive hardware. And while the brain was expanding, other parts of the body were shrinking. The massive, grinding molars of earlier hominids became smaller and more refined. The great bony crests on their skulls, which anchored powerful jaw muscles needed to chew raw tubers and tough meat for hours, began to recede. Their faces became flatter, their jaws less robust. Cooked food is soft food, a meal that no longer required a powerful, energy-intensive chewing apparatus. But the most profound change is one we can only infer. Brains and digestive systems are both incredibly metabolically expensive. You cannot run two such demanding systems at full power on a limited energy budget. So as the brain grew, the gut had to shrink. The long, complex intestinal tract needed to slowly break down raw food was no longer necessary. The fire had already done that work. This trade-off, a smaller gut for a bigger brain, is the ultimate biological signature of the cooking revolution. Our very anatomy was remolded by the flames. This physical transformation provided the new hardware, but what new software was this bigger brain now able to run? This simple act of tending the fire was humanity's first lesson in long-term thinking. The flickering flame was a demanding partner, one that required constant care and, most importantly, foresight. You could not simply wait for the cold to arrive to go looking for kindling. The fire demanded that you think ahead, to gather dry wood while the sun was still shining, to anticipate a future need and act upon it in the present. This daily ritual of fuel collection and fire maintenance was a powerful workout for a very specific part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the region responsible for executive function, for planning, for impulse control, and for the concept of delayed gratification. For a creature that had lived entirely in the immediate present, this was a cognitive revolution. The ability to resist the urge to rest now, in order to secure warmth and safety later, marked a fundamental break from the instinct-driven existence of every other animal on the planet. It was the birth of strategic thought. This new mental muscle did not just apply to the fire itself. Once our ancestors could hold the concept of tomorrow in their minds, they could apply that same foresight to other challenges. They could plan a migration route for the next season, knowing where water sources would be. They could begin to cache tools or food for future use. This temporal reasoning, this ability to mentally travel through time, is the bedrock of all complex problem solving. It allowed for the conception of tools that were not for immediate use, but for a specific task they anticipated next week or next year. The hand axe was no longer just a rock for today's butchering. it was a carefully crafted asset for tomorrow's unknown challenges. This cognitive leap from reactive instinct to proactive planning set the stage for everything that was to come. Fire was not just a tool, it was a tool maker. Its heat became a creative force that unlocked the potential hidden within the very materials of the ancient world. Early innovators discovered that by carefully heating certain types of stone, like flint or chert, they could control how it fractured. The heat altered the stone's internal structure, making it easier to flake off long, razor-sharp slivers. This was a leap beyond simply chipping one rock against another. It was a form of precision engineering, allowing for the creation of finely crafted spear points, delicate scraping tools, and sophisticated blades that were far more effective than anything that had come before. But the innovation did not stop with stone. They learned to thrust the ends of wooden spears into the embers, hardening the tips into deadly, durable points that could withstand the impact of a large hunt. This process of using fire to fundamentally transform raw materials was humanity's first step into chemistry. It required a deep, observational understanding of cause and effect. How long did the stone need to heat? What was the perfect color of the embers for hardening wood without burning it? Each successful creation was a lesson in the properties of matter, a quiet experiment conducted in the glow of the campfire. This mastery of heat-aided production supercharged our entire technological journey, setting a pace of innovation that was simply unimaginable before. Yet, as our hands shaped these new, complex tools, our minds were struggling to shape an equally complex new world of ideas, a world that demanded a new kind of tool entirely. That flickering firelight, while a shield against the dark, created a unique communication challenge. In the dim, dancing glow, the subtle facial expressions and detailed hand gestures used during the bright day became far less reliable. How could you silently signal the difference between a stealthy predator and a skittish prey animal when everyone's features were masked by shifting shadows? This sensory limitation placed a powerful new premium on sound. The voice, unaffected by the poor light, became the most effective tool for sharing complex, nuanced information. A simple grunt would no longer suffice. To warn of a lion required a different sound than to point out a gazelle. To explain the intricate process of heating stone to make a tool demanded a sequence of distinct sounds, a proto-instruction manual spoken aloud. This was the crucible in which language was forged, born from the practical need to be understood in the fire's unreliable light. Around the communal hearth, these new vocalizations blossomed into the world's first true stories. The day's events were no longer just a series of disjointed moments. They were raw material for a narrative. An elder might recount the narrow escape from a cave bear, using different tones and rhythms to build suspense and convey the lesson of which path to avoid. A mother might tell a simple tale about a clever ancestor who learned to find water by watching the ants, passing down vital survival knowledge in a memorable, engaging form. These were not just facts, they were experiences shared and lessons embedded in a compelling structure. For the first time, knowledge could travel through time, leaping from one mind to another without direct observation. You did not need to see the water source yourself, you simply needed to hear the story about the ants. This ability to share non-observable information created a cumulative culture, a collective brain far greater than any single mind. A tool-making technique once stumbled upon by one person could be explained and refined by the entire group around the fire. The best way to build a shelter, the signs of changing seasons, the location of distant resources, all of this knowledge could be stored not in one fragile memory, but in the shared stories of the tribe. Each generation could stand on the shoulders of the previous one, their progress accelerating not through biological evolution, but through the rapid evolution of ideas. The campfire became humanity's first library, its first university, its first boardroom for innovation. The stories born in that primal light did more than just transmit practical skills. They began to weave the fabric of belief and identity, tales of powerful ancestral spirits who controlled the weather, or of a great buffalo that sacrificed itself to feed the people, gave meaning to a mysterious and often dangerous world. These foundational myths bound the group together with a shared sense of purpose and a common understanding of their place in the cosmos. The stories told to make sense of the flickering flames and the vast, starry sky above would, over millennia, evolve into the epic poems, sacred texts, and grand narratives that define civilizations. The human mind, once trapped in the immediate present, had learned to travel through time on the wings of words, all thanks to the circle of light that pushed back the night. Deep within a cave in what is now France, the flickering torchlight of an ancient artist danced across a stone canvas. This was not a casual doodle. Reaching back over 17,000 years, the paintings of Lascaux reveal a profound and sophisticated relationship with the flame. The artists did not simply work by fire's light, they harnessed its symbolic power. The images of stampeding bison, powerful stags, and other majestic creatures were more than just depictions of the hunt. They were a form of sympathetic magic, a ritual act performed in the sacred, fire-lit darkness. By capturing the essence of these animals on the wall, the painters may have believed they were gaining power over them in the real world, ensuring a successful hunt and the continued survival of the tribe. This was one of humanity's first cathedrals, and the fire that illuminated it was the central altar. The flame was the medium through which the human mind first projected its hopes, its fears, and its understanding of the invisible forces that governed life and death. This spiritual connection transformed the simple campfire into a sacred hearth. The hearth fire became the soul of the home, a living entity that required constant tending. To let it die was not just an inconvenience, it was a spiritual failure, a break in the connection to the ancestors and the gods. This concept of an eternal flame emerged independently in cultures across the globe. The Vestal Virgins of Rome guarded a sacred fire that symbolized the eternal life of the city itself. For the Zoroastrians, the fire temple was a pure representation of divine light and wisdom. This was not mere superstition. It was a powerful metaphor made real, a way for a community to visualize its own unbroken continuity, its spirit burning brightly through the generations. The flame's transformative power made it the perfect bridge to the supernatural. The act of cremation, for instance, used fire to transform the physical body, releasing the spirit to the afterlife. A sacrificial offering consumed by the flames was seen as a gift carried on the smoke directly to the gods. These rituals were humanity's first attempts to bargain with or appease the powerful and unseen forces of nature. They were acts of meaning-making, using the most potent tool they possessed to answer the great, unanswerable questions of existence. This deep, psychological embedding of fire as a sacred, living force shaped the very structure of our thoughts, preparing the human mind for its next great leap into the unknown. Deep within the caves of Chauvet, the art was inseparable from the flame. To venture into that absolute darkness was to step into another world, a realm accessible only with the aid of fire. Artists carried simple stone lamps, shallow dishes filled with animal fat, and a wick of moss, their small, steady flames cutting through the oppressive black. The air would have been thick with the smell of burning tallow and the sound of their own breathing, a sensory experience that alone marked this as a sacred space. But it was the interaction of this artificial light with the art itself that created true magic. As the torchlight flickered and danced across the uneven cave walls, the painted animals seemed to move. A herd of horses would appear to gallop, a bison would seem to shift its weight, its muscles rippling in the dynamic play of light and shadow. This was not a static gallery, it was cinema for the ancient mind. The experience was deeply immersive and almost certainly ritualistic, connecting the community to the powerful spirits of the hunt in a way that daylight could never achieve. The very act of painting was an astonishing cognitive leap. To look at a living, breathing mammoth and then translate its massive, three-dimensional form onto the flat surface of a rock wall requires a profound kind of abstract thinking. The artist had to hold the image of the animal in their mind, separate from its physical reality, and then represent its essence with a few masterful lines. This symbolic representation, this ability to create a stand-in for reality, is a cornerstone of modern human cognition. It is the same mental software that allows us to understand maps, read words, and comprehend mathematical symbols. This capacity was forged and refined in the world above, around the countless campfires where stories were told, plans were drawn in the dirt, and complex social relationships were negotiated. The paintings were not mere decorations. They were the birth of art as we know it, a direct and stunning product of the brain revolution. This artistic impulse signaled a broader expansion of the mind, a new capacity to project inner worlds onto the outer one, and to seek meaning in the very act of creation. The steady glow of the hearth offered the human mind its first glimpse of a predictable world. Outside, nature was a chaotic whirlwind of sudden storms and unseen predators, but inside the ring of stones, the fire obeyed certain rules. It needed fuel, it craved air, and it responded to careful tending. This daily interaction with a controllable force encouraged a profound cognitive shift, a movement away from simply reacting to the environment and toward understanding its underlying principles. The human mind began to look for patterns everywhere. Why did the geese fly south at a certain time? Why did the moon change its shape in a regular cycle? The fire had taught them that the universe might operate on a set of dependable laws, laying the very first fragile stones on the path to scientific reasoning. They were no longer just living in the world, they were beginning to decode it. This new perspective was rooted in the most basic transformations fire made possible. Watching a tough root become soft and nourishing, or feeling the bitter cold retreat before a wave of warmth, demonstrated the power of change in a tangible, repeatable way. The abstract concept of transformation was no longer a mystery. It was a daily miracle happening before their eyes in the flames. Managing this miracle required a new kind of thought. To keep a fire alive was to understand a simple system. You learned that green wood produced smoke while dry wood produced a clear flame, that stacking logs in a certain way allowed for better airflow, and that a single stray ember could consume an entire forest. This was systems thinking in its most primal form, a cause and effect logic applied to an invisible process. You could not see the fire's hunger for oxygen, but you could see the consequences of smothering it. You could not hold combustion in your hand, but you could master its behavior. This ability to reason about an unseen force, to manipulate a process of energy and transformation, forged the cognitive tools that would later be applied to the invisible world of numbers, to the abstract realms of justice, and to the fundamental questions of existence. The mind that could tame a flame was a mind preparing to ask, what else can we understand? What else can we change? This newfound power did not just reshape our view of the world, it fundamentally altered our place within it. That primal fear of the dark, a constant companion for millions of years, was finally held at bay by the flames. For the first time, our ancestors were not just hiding from the night, they were actively pushing it back, creating a pocket of absolute security. This was not a small thing. The relentless, low-level stress of listening for predators, of shivering in the cold, drained mental energy and kept the brain locked in a state of survival. But within the fire's warm circle, that fear dissolved. The mind, no longer consumed by hypervigilance, could finally relax, and a relaxed mind is a curious mind. It is a mind that begins to wonder, to experiment, to play. This was the psychological space where innovation was born, where a child might idly twist a vine into a knot, or an adult might notice how a certain stone sparked when struck. The fire did not just provide light, it provided the mental bandwidth for creativity to flourish. This new sense of safety was deeply tribal. The firelight drew a literal and symbolic line in the sand. Inside the circle was warmth, community, and the known world of family and friends. Outside was the chilling void, the realm of danger and the unknown. This powerful dichotomy of us versus them, of safe inside versus perilous outside, forged an incredibly strong group identity. You were not just an individual huddled for warmth, you were a member of the Firekeepers, a part of a collective that had mastered the night. This shared identity was the glue that held early societies together, fostering loyalty and cooperation on a scale never before possible. But perhaps the most transformative psychological shift was the birth of a new emotion, confidence. To command a force as wild and destructive as fire instilled a profound belief in human capability. We were no longer passive victims of a chaotic world. We were active participants who could bend a fundamental element to our will. If we could conquer the night and tame the flame, what else might we be able to do? This burgeoning self-assurance was the essential fuel for the next great adventure. It gave our ancestors the courage to pack their embers in a fire-hollowed log and turn their faces toward the horizon, ready to carry their revolutionary spark into the vast, uncharted corners of the earth. That single, portable flame became humanity's ultimate survival kit. With the ability to carry fire, perhaps in a hollowed-out log smoldering with embers, our ancestors were no longer tethered to the warm, forgiving climates of Africa. They could now turn their faces toward the north, toward the great, icy expanses of Europe and Asia. This was the key that unlocked the world. In the bitter cold of a glacial period, fire was not a luxury, it was life itself. It provided the essential warmth that made previously uninhabitable regions accessible, allowing small bands of humans to survive winters that would have been fatal without a controlled heat source. But its utility went far beyond simple warmth. They learned to use fire as a landscape architect. A carefully set blaze could clear away dense, impenetrable undergrowth, creating open grasslands that attracted grazing animals like deer and wild horses. This was ecosystem engineering on a local scale, a way to herd prey and shape the environment to their advantage, turning a chaotic forest into a managed hunting ground. The fire's signal was also a powerful tool for coordination. The column of smoke by day or the glow on the horizon by night could guide scattered hunting parties back to camp or warn a distant group of danger. And for any large predator considering an attack on a human encampment, the sight and smell of that unpredictable, crackling force was often deterrent enough. This portable package of heat, light, and protection fundamentally transformed humanity's relationship with the planet. We were no longer just another species adapting to a single environment. We became a global species, carrying our own miniature sun into every corner of the Earth, from the steppes of Siberia to the coastlines of Australia. But this great expansion, fueled by the flame, created a new challenge. The small, intimate social world of the campfire, where everyone knew everyone, was suddenly not enough. As populations grew and spread across continents, how could these larger, more dispersed groups maintain the cohesion that had been forged in the firelight? The simple stories and face-to-face trust of the small band had to evolve into something far more powerful to bind thousands of strangers together. That control over the flame became the first form of true social power. In a larger, more complex tribe, the person who could summon fire from nothing, or who possessed the sacred duty of keeping the central hearth burning through a stormy night, was more than just a caretaker. They were a lifeline. This role of Firekeeper likely emerged as one of humanity's first specialized jobs, a position imbued with immense prestige and authority. Imagine the respect afforded to the elder who could reliably start a fire by patiently spinning a stick between their hands, or the family entrusted with the smoldering embers when the group moved camp. Their knowledge was not just practical, it was magical. They held the secret to warmth, safety, and the community's very survival. This control over a vital resource naturally translated into status, planting an early seed of social hierarchy. It was no longer just about physical strength or hunting prowess. It was about possessing irreplaceable knowledge. This specialized wisdom became valuable cultural capital, a kind of inheritance passed down through specific lineages, creating the first inklings of a privileged class. The central fire itself began to change in meaning. The communal hearth, once a simple ring of stones for everyone, gradually evolved into a symbolic center of power. We see this echo through history in the eternal flames guarded by Vestal virgins in Rome, where the fire's health was directly tied to the empire's fortune, and in the great hearths of medieval kings, where to warm oneself was to be in the monarch's favor. This centralization of a fundamental resource foreshadowed the economic engines of future civilizations. Just as control of the fire pit granted influence, so too would control over grain stores, metal ores, and trade routes. The social world was being remade not by a decree, but by the simple, undeniable authority of the one who kept the dark and the cold at bay. The crackle of the hearth was the sound of the world's first factory floor. This was not a place of separate industry, but a single, multi-purpose hub where fire transformed raw nature into human utility. Around this central flame, the very concept of a household economy was born. Here, food was not just eaten but processed and preserved through cooking, extending its life and creating the first edible surplus. Here, tools were not just found but forged, as wood was hardened and stone was carefully heated to fracture in predictable ways. This single source of light and heat became the engine for every essential domestic task, binding the survival of the family unit directly to its transformative power. As these fire-dependent skills grew more complex, a natural division of labor emerged. Someone in the group, perhaps the individual with the steadiest hand and keenest eye for the color of hot stone, would have spent more time crafting tools. Another, who understood the subtle alchemy of heat and dough, might have become the group's most valued baker. This was the birth of specialization, the first step beyond a society where everyone did everything. The skilled firekeeper evolved into the first blacksmith, the careful cook into the first artisan baker. Their value was not in their ability to hunt or gather, but in their unique mastery of the flame, a mastery that produced goods and services for the entire community. This specialization was only possible because of the food surplus that cooking created. When a single cooked tuber delivers more energy with less effort than a handful of raw plants, the group needs fewer people dedicated solely to the relentless search for food. This caloric surplus freed up hands and minds. It allowed for the emergence of the first full-time artisans, leaders, and spiritual guides, individuals who did not produce their own food but were supported by the collective surplus generated around the hearth. Their specialized knowledge, in turn, made the entire group more resilient and efficient. This new economic reality naturally gave rise to trade, a band known for its exceptionally sharp, fire-hardened spear points could trade them with a neighboring group for rare pigments or high-quality flint. A family skilled in firing sturdy, waterproof clay pots could exchange them for dried fish or animal skins. The value of these fire-crafted objects, durable, reliable, and impossible to create without controlled heat, established some of humanity's earliest forms of wealth and commerce. The economic patterns of barter, value, and specialization that were first kindled in the firelight would, over millennia, scale up to become the vast global markets we know today. This economic revolution, however, was quietly accompanied by a profound shift in the most intimate rhythms of our daily lives and even our own biology. That nightly glow of the campfire did more than just push back the darkness. It began to rewire our internal biology. The steady rhythm of sunrise and sunset had governed life for millions of years, but the deliberate introduction of firelight in the evening created the first meaningful rift between human time and solar time. The warm, orange light of the flames, while comforting, sent a powerful signal to the brain. It mimicked the wavelengths of a lingering sunset, tricking our pineal gland into delaying the release of melatonin, the crucial hormone that prepares the body for sleep. For the first time, our internal clocks, our circadian rhythms, were being gently nudged out of sync with the natural world. This was not an instant transformation, but a slow, evolutionary pressure that began the process of granting our species a new kind of temporal freedom. We were no longer purely slaves to the sun's schedule. This biological tweak likely reshaped the very structure of our rest. Historians and sleep researchers studying pre-industrial European diaries and medical texts have found numerous references to a sleep pattern that seems strange to us now: segmented sleep. People would experience a first sleep shortly after dusk, lasting a few hours. Then they would wake for a period of 1 or 2 hours in the middle of the night, a time of quiet wakefulness, before returning to a second sleep until dawn. This nocturnal intermission was not a sign of insomnia, but a new, fire-altered norm. What did people do during this quiet hour of the night? It was a time profoundly different from the busy day. Freed from the immediate demands of labor or social obligation, this was a space for the mind to wander. It might have been used for quiet conversation with a partner, for intimacy, for tending the fire, or simply for lying still and reflecting on dreams. Some scholars suggest this was a uniquely fertile period for creative thought and problem-solving, a time when the brain, rested yet unburdened by the day's clutter, could make unexpected connections. This new rhythm represented a further, crucial step in our cognitive independence. The human brain was now operating on a schedule partially of its own making, dictated by culture and technology rather than pure biology. This newfound control over our sleep-wake cycle was a monumental achievement, but it came with a hidden, long-term cost that we are only now beginning to fully understand in our own brightly lit modern world. Yet the very flames that forged civilization also held a terrifying new power. For the first time, humanity possessed a force that could be wielded not just to build, but to obliterate. The same fire that hardened a spear point could be set loose to clear an entire forest, driving herds over cliffs for a massive hunt. This control over landscape-scale destruction was a strategic revolution, but it contained a dark and inevitable logic. If fire could be used against animals, it could also be turned against other people. A rival band's encampment, with its vulnerable grass and wood shelters, was no longer just a territorial competitor, it was a potential target. The first act of warfare using fire was likely a raid under the cover of night, a flaming brand tossed into a settlement, unleashing a chaos far more terrifying and absolute than any hand-to-hand combat. This was a horrifying escalation of conflict, moving from skirmishes to the potential for total annihilation. Alongside this deliberate use came the ever-present threat of accident. A single stray spark from a cooking fire, a gust of wind carrying an ember beyond the firebreak, and in moments the hard-won accumulation of a season could vanish. Food stores meant to last through a lean winter, carefully crafted tools, and the very shelters that provided safety, all consumed in a roaring, indifferent inferno. These devastating losses taught humanity one of its first and most brutal lessons about technology. Every tool, no matter how life-giving, carries an inherent capacity for catastrophe. This duality was etched into our collective memory, a permanent anxiety woven into the fabric of progress. The knowledge that everything you loved and relied upon could be erased in a single, fiery moment introduced a new kind of fear into the human psyche, a profound vulnerability that came from the very source of their safety. This constant risk demanded a new social contract. Rules were not optional, they were a matter of survival. Elaborate protocols for fire safety emerged, dictating where fires could be built, how they should be surrounded by stones, and who was responsible for watching them through the night. The role of Firekeeper became one of grave responsibility, and the penalty for negligence could be exile. Communities had to learn to live with this double-edged power, balancing its immense benefits against its catastrophic risks. This fundamental tension between creation and destruction, between the Hearth and the Holocaust, is a story that began in the ancient world but continues to define our relationship with technology to this very day. The embers of those ancient fires did more than just warm our bodies. They left a permanent mark on our very blueprint. The profound shift to a fire-dependent lifestyle over hundreds of thousands of years acted as a powerful force of natural selection, quietly reshaping our genetic code generation after generation. Our bodies began to evolve in response to the new world we had created. Consider the simple act of eating a cooked meal. With starches now softened and pre-digested by heat, individuals who produced more of the enzyme amylase in their saliva gained a distinct advantage. They could extract energy from potatoes and grains even more efficiently, turning a cooked diet into a turbocharged fuel source. This genetic tweak, favoring better starch digestion, became common in populations with a long history of cooking, weaving the legacy of the hearth directly into our metabolism. We may even carry adaptations that helped us tolerate the downsides of our new technology. Living constantly with fire meant breathing in smoke and being exposed to new toxins created by combustion. Over deep time, genetic variants that offered some protection from these irritants likely gave certain individuals a health edge, allowing them to thrive in a smoky environment that would have been far more harmful to other primates. This was evolution in action, fine-tuning our biology to not just use fire, but to live intimately with its consequences. The social world forged in the firelight exerted its own selective pressure. The intricate dance of maintaining a communal fire, of sharing its responsibilities and benefits, demanded a new level of social intelligence. Those who were better at reading intentions, communicating needs, and cooperating within a complex web of relationships were more likely to succeed and pass on their genes. This constant, gentle pressure over millennia favored the very genetic underpinnings that support advanced communication, empathy, and group coordination. While we cannot point to a single fire gene, the cumulative effect of this fire-centered existence is written into our DNA. We are, in a very real sense, a species born of flame, our biology fundamentally altered by the long-ago decision to bring the spark into the center of our lives. No other creature on Earth commands fire as we do. That simple fact illuminates a profound chasm in cognitive ability. Consider the fascinating case of firehawks, birds of prey in Australia that have learned to pick up burning twigs from a wildfire's edge and drop them in fresh territory to flush out terrified prey. This is a remarkable display of animal intelligence, but it remains an opportunistic act. The birds are capitalizing on a fire they did not start and cannot control. They are riding the wave of a natural disaster, not building the wave itself. The human relationship with flame is fundamentally different. It hinges on a complex suite of mental skills that, when combined, appear to be uniquely our own. To create fire from scratch requires not just understanding friction, but the foresight to gather the right materials beforehand. To contain a blaze within a ring of stones demands an understanding of its properties and boundaries. To maintain a flame through a stormy night involves planning and delayed gratification, saving dry fuel for a future need. And to use fire creatively for cooking, tool making, or landscape management requires deep causal reasoning. You must understand that heat transforms food, that it alters the structure of stone, and that a controlled burn today will yield a fertile hunting ground tomorrow. This entire process was also a social one, demanding imitation and teaching. A child watching an elder skillfully knap a heated flint was not just seeing a tool being made, they were absorbing a technological tradition passed down through generations. This created a powerful feedback loop that accelerated our evolution. Fire provided the nutritional bounty to fuel bigger brains, and those bigger brains, in turn, devised more sophisticated ways to use fire. They learned to create ceramics from clay, to smelt metals from rock, to forge tools of bronze and iron. This was an evolutionary arms race that happened entirely within our own species, a cycle of brain and flame pushing each other to new heights. The gap between human cognition and that of even our smartest animal relatives can, in many ways, be measured by the presence or absence of the controlled flame in their lives. Our unique partnership with this primal element set our feet on a path of relentless technological ascent, a journey that began with a single spark and continues to this very day. This feedback loop between our technology and our biology became an engine of relentless change. We did not simply adapt to a static world, we created a new world with fire, and that new world in turn reshaped us. This is the essence of what scientists call the cognitive niche. Our ancestors were not just finding shelter, they were building it. They were not just finding food, they were transforming it. Each of these acts changed the very pressures of natural selection. The invention of fire was the ultimate entry into this niche. It altered our diet, which then altered our bodies. Our jaws grew smaller, our guts shortened, and our brains ballooned in size. But this was only the first turn of the wheel. That bigger brain, powered by cooked food, immediately went to work on the original problem, fire itself. It devised better ways to start it, using friction or striking sparks from stone. It developed more efficient ways to contain it, building sophisticated hearths and ovens. This improved control over the flame then led to even better tools, like heat-treated spear points that could bring down larger game. A more successful hunt meant more protein, more surplus energy to fuel further brain growth and support even more technological tinkerers within the group. Each cycle of innovation reinforced the next, accelerating our evolution at a dizzying pace that left all other species behind. We became a species caught in a self-made whirlwind, our own creations driving our biological destiny. This is the profound legacy of that first spark. We are not just a product of natural selection, we are a product of a specific kind of selection, one where our tools began to call the shots. The fire did not just warm us, it built us, pushing our minds to become the complex, creative, and endlessly ambitious organs they are today. And this self-made evolutionary pressure never truly stopped. The same fundamental dynamic that played out around the campfire now drives our world of silicon and code, a testament to the enduring power of that first, world-altering loop. Our screens now cast the same primal glow as those ancient flames. We instinctively gather around smartphones and laptops in the evening. forming digital circles just as our ancestors clustered around the hearth. This is our new campfire, a portal to social connection, storytelling, and a vast well of shared knowledge, all accessed long after dark. These devices are not just tools, they are cognitive partners. Just as fire outsourced the hard work of digestion, freeing our biology to build bigger brains, our digital technologies are outsourcing the tasks of memory and calculation. Our phones remember phone numbers and facts for us, while complex algorithms handle math we could never do in our heads. This is freeing up our mental energy for new kinds of problems, potentially reshaping the very architecture of our neural pathways for a new era. The parallels run deep. The campfire created a new social world of complex relationships and shared identity, and our digital networks are doing the same on a global scale. Online communities form around the most niche interests, creating bonds between people separated by vast distances. Information, and unfortunately misinformation, spreads through these networks with the speed and unpredictability of wildfire, transforming public discourse. New forms of creativity, from viral videos to intricate digital art, are the modern equivalent of the stories and songs first shared in the Firelight, defining our collective culture. Recognizing that we have been here before, that humanity has navigated a shift this profound, is incredibly empowering. The brain revolution sparked by fire gives us a framework for understanding the digital revolution happening now. It reminds us that these monumental changes are not entirely unprecedented. They are the latest chapter in the long story of how we use technology to reshape our minds and our world. This historical perspective brings us to a critical juncture, forcing us to ask what kind of future we will build with this new, equally powerful flame. The fundamental principle of the campfire now powers our entire civilization. We are still harnessing external energy to transform our world. Only now we burn ancient sunlight locked in coal, oil, and gas. The Industrial Revolution was not a break from our past, but a massive scaling up of that first controlled flame. Its steam engines and factories were the roaring hearths of a new age, unleashing a level of progress and cognitive change that our ancestors could never have conceived. This fire-powered leap built our modern world, but it came with a cost our ancestors never had to consider. Their smoke dissipated into a vast, empty sky, while ours accumulates, trapping heat and altering the very climate of the planet. We are now grappling with the consequences of our own success, forced to seek a transition to energy sources that do not threaten the system that supports us. The next great brain revolution may very well depend on our ability to master clean energy, just as the first one depended on mastering fire. This is the ultimate cognitive test. Solving the interconnected puzzles of climate change, resource management, and global cooperation demands the highest form of the foresight and planning that fire first nurtured in our ancient minds. We must now think on a planetary scale and across generations, applying our hard-won capacity for delayed gratification to a challenge that is invisible, gradual, and overwhelmingly complex. The story that began with a single spark in the darkness has become a story about the future of our entire species. It asks us whether the minds that were forged by flame are now wise enough to choose a different kind of fire. As we reflect on this immense journey, from a flicker in a cave to the glow of a smartphone screen, we can recognize the enduring flame within us. It is not just a memory of heat and light, but the very spark of curiosity, cooperation, and ingenuity that has carried us this far. That inner fire, born so long ago, is now our greatest hope for the journey ahead. From that first precarious spark in the depths of prehistory, fire has been the constant companion of the human mind, a partner in our cognitive evolution. We have journeyed from the primal fear of the dark to the profound social bonds of the hearth, from a diet of raw sustenance to the metabolic fuel for our magnificent brains. Fire taught us foresight, forged our tools, ignited our language, and inspired our first art. It is not an exaggeration to say that the flickering flame is responsible for the very world we live in today, a world of technology, culture, and abstract thought. The brain revolution sparked by fire is an ongoing process, and its legacy is our boundless capacity for innovation and understanding. The fire that reshaped human thought still burns within us, driving us to illuminate the unknown. If this journey into our fiery past has ignited your curiosity, share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries that shaped humanity.